For those who have been around the channel for a while, you probably remember this.
I don't believe my imagination plays a single role because I am an aggressive unit tester and I have all my code unit tested and perfectly working. So when I make a refactor, I'm confident.
Where I am, the wrong extreme you might believe I am at prevents my engineers from being hampered by bullshit. And I am always looking for bullshit to trim.
We'll go with your theory here. How do you know when you've written too many unit tests? If you say none, we're fist fighting.
The Prime Theo unit test debate was the entry point for a lot of people on my channel, and I owe him forever for having that conversation. While we didn't fully agree, we actually found a lot of places where we were largely aligned, and over time, I think we've become more aligned. Some amount of this is his philosophy around testing changing, some amount of it is mine, and more of it is just us hearing each other's arguments more and understanding where both sit. So why am I talking about this? Why am I thinking about unit testing once again? I was just pulling up some videos in the background, and I watched Prime's most recent unit testing video and was really surprised at how much I agreed with the arguments. So decided to pause it and watch it with y'all instead. Let's react to some of our favorite React developers' content.
Well, hey, I love Dave's content, but his delivery sounds so condescending. See, the problem is that I don't really buy most of his content. Like, test-driven development is great when you have a black box. Way better version of development is this. Is that you build something, you throw that something away, you learn from it, you throw it away, and then you build it again, and you make tests that are effective.
The thing that is being said underneath here that I really agree on is that writing code to solve a problem is easier than writing a good test. And importantly, you get more useful information from that. If you write something, get it working, and then decide to throw it all away, all the mistakes and problems you ran into when you built that are going to stay in your head as you build the better implementation. And now you also know exactly what the spec's going to look like. Well, not exactly, but you have a much better idea. So the tests you write can be much more meaningful as well. So we're only 20 seconds in and we're already in really strong agreement.
That's how I like building. I don't like testing to determine my architecture, but I like to make it a very, concrete or foundational part of my development.
I just like the word foundational here, because for me, foundation is like very much a starting point type thing where it's what everything else is built on top of. And what he's described thus far isn't necessarily that, but let's let him cook.
Right. That's why Harpoon 2, Harpoon 1, pretty much no tests. I was exploring. I was just trying to understand what I was trying to build. Harpoon 2, yeah, it's going to be good. We got everything working. I really made sure that we had some good tests, so I wasn't just me making shit up. You know what I mean? But I really like build once. And notice that I threw away all of Harpoon. I did not even look at it once, because once you start, no, unit testing is not bullshit. There's plenty of great reasons to unit test. Whenever I hear unit testing is bullshit, what I think you are is a CRUD/UI developer, and that's it. You've never developed anything hard.
I think the part here that he's not touching on is that most devs, most of the time, are CRUD and UI devs. The vast majority of the work most of us are doing are that. Even if you do sometimes solve hard problems, the majority of the time you're not. And if you are solving a hard problem, is it worth encoding that solution in a unit test? Yeah, but so much of our work isn't solving hard problems for the first time. It's assembling hard solutions to solve a tedious problem. Something like Ping is a really complex service to build, but so many of the pieces that need to be tested heavily, like the algorithm for compressing the video and the WebRTC feeds, that's being tested by someone else. We're assembling the parts. And should our assembly be tested some amount? Yeah, that's what end-to-end testing is for. But unit testing requires you to be building complex units, and I find that to be incredibly rare at product companies. There are exceptions, especially with what Prime's doing at Netflix, but the majority of the time, the code we're writing can and should be really simple. And what I find is that unit tests are used to maintain existing complexity. And there's a lot of code that fits in his model of write it once, delete and rewrite, that never had that rewrite step. And instead of doing the delete rewrite, we're adding a bunch of unit tests, almost like glue and tape to hold it together. So that's the problem I have with unit tests. It's not because the tests themselves are necessarily bad by being a unit test. It's that unit testing, one of those janky early implementations, basically guarantees it never gets rewritten. If you add tests in too early, you're adding so much friction, both to contribution and to deprecation, that it never ends up happening.
Get wrecked, shambles, right? When you say unit testing is not difficult, you've clearly never done really complex dynamic algorithms, right? Dynamic programming is not easy, and it's very good to have testing for that.
Okay, real talk. Let's pull the audience. I'm curious. Have you worked on a hard dynamic algorithm problem in the last 6 months at work? Poll. So it's in the context of something that like is a complex enough algorithmic problem that has a simple in and out, but the actual process is complex enough that writing a unit test almost feels essential for it. Yes, no. So y'all better get in there. And I want to be clear, like there's no shame in being on either side of this. It's a little higher than I expected, but it's still like less than 1/3 to 2/3. And again, this isn't because these developers are worse. It's because their focus is on other things. And as such, the developers in this category hating unit tests makes a lot of sense because they don't benefit from them. If you're in this category, you don't really benefit from unit tests. But if you're in this category, people talking shit on unit tests feels just absurd and chaotic because, again, they help a ton when you are doing these complex problems with a simple in and out, but a complex unit that makes that transformation. Let's get back to the video.
Sudo apt install git it wrecked. Yeah. 100% coverage is shit. Absolutely. Hands down, absolutely. No, you git wrecked, kid. No, real talk. Like unit testing makes no sense. When people say it's like, you absolutely don't need to do that. You can't refactor untested code. You're just moving shit around. But yeah, but unit tests, when you refactor code, naturally a bunch of them break also.
Yep. Again, like this idea that unit tests make your code more refactorable is absolutely fucking made up. That is a lie. Anybody who says that is being dishonest or has just never done a refactor. It doesn't work. Unit tests are like the most annoying thing when we do refactors. When I was at Twitch, there was a code base that I refactored and like massively simplified. Like I cut the amount of code by like 3/4. And we shipped the new version. We put it under a bunch of feature flags. We ran both, A/B tested. Users were having a better experience with my version. So we shipped it. And then when we went to deprecate the old version, we couldn't because the code coverage line in the code base was 80%. And that massive pile of code had 82% code cov. So when I deleted it, we went below the threshold for the entire Twitch code base and it wouldn't let me merge the deprecation, even though none of the code was being used, just because it had enough tests. And because it was less code than my replacement, it didn't offset. Anybody who thinks that's worth it just has never worked at a real fucking company.
All right. I do like stable API testing. I think it's really, really good to do stable API testing. The hard part is that you don't test it for if conditions you know secretly inside of your code, right? You have to treat it like a black box. But unit testing can be very, 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 very beneficial if and only if you have something that's a very constrained algorithm. Here's a good example. If I had to go and build, this is from Netflix. This is something I've had to do at Netflix. I had to build a video sync player that would take in video frames as quickly as possible and pretend to play them and check for dropped frames and how dropped frames would affect everything, and like built an infrastructure to high play video like at 12, 15x normal speed as fast as possible. And
one more poll. Have you ever built something as hard as what Prime just described? Yes, no, yeah. And you know what? Same. And there's no shame in that. No shame at all in that. I've done some crazy stuff with FFmpeg, but I've never gone to that level. And if I was at that level, I'd probably be writing a lot of tests. And again, like this is a difference that I'm not trying to point out to shame or highlight any individual's capabilities. It's to highlight the difference in that the majority of code is solving simple, stupid problems. The vast majority of code is solving simple, stupid problems, which means the majority of unit tests almost necessarily are checking simple, stupid problems. Let's get back to that video.
Saw that, Tiffy. And so that was like a real thing. What data structure did I use? Dynamic programming. It was just a dynamic programming problem. I kept track of everything and kept a spill. I had to keep track of spill from nanoseconds. It was super fun, but I had to create unit tests for that because it was extremely hard to get right, and it was extremely hard to actually test because if I wanted to test it, I had to like launch Netflix, run my program to start shoving things through, and then make sure that my sync was doing the right thing. And it was getting like, you would get how many thousands upon thousands of 10,000 frames. And so it's like, how could you ever do that in any real sense? Unit test it. It makes 1,000 times more sense. I use unit test as a way to drive correctness and to implement stuff because it's fast. You know what I mean? It's fast and easy to do. I don't use unit tests to ensure, I don't look at unit tests as a way for like safety. I use it as a way to drive features through, right? And
baller take. This is actually the point where I realized I had to pause and do this live because, I am so tired of people pushing this narrative that unit tests are necessary for your code base to be safe, because they do not help much with that.
My work, a merge request gets auto-rejected if there's no test attached. Yeah, see, I think that's wrong too. I think that that's also equally wrong. I only manually test while drinking my milk. Damn.
The comment about, let's rewind to it, PR is getting auto-rejected if there's no tests, that's the stupidest thing. One of my favorite stories that goes around randomly is a Facebook employee that got a job at another company, and when he started working on that team, he filed a PR, and when he made some changes, it caused one of the tests to break. So he deleted the test because it was getting in his way, and the team got all mad, like, you can't just delete tests, you have to fix them. He's like, why? The test was bringing no value. It blocked me and was no longer accurate, so I got rid of it. If you're treating these things as intrinsically valuable because they're tests, then I want to delete all of them and restart, because your testing philosophy is that fundamentally flawed. Tests are a slightly better version of a code comment that guides you in the right direction as you go.
I also watch Netflix at 20 to 30 speed. It's actually really hard to play video every single frame at 20x. Like, that's a really hard problem. If you're playing, like, say you're at 60 frames a second video, 50 frames a second audio, that's 110 frames per second, so 20x. You know, that's 2,200 frames that you have to shove through.
Possible imposter here. There is almost nothing on Netflix that's 60 FPS. Everything in there is going to be 24, maybe 48.
It's actually extremely difficult. That's why when you fast forward, it's chunky, right? They kind of, you have to swim. You have to, like, go to the next chunk, and that's why whenever you hit a place, sometimes there's a pause, because, you know, if you have a bunch of video sent down, you have to, like, fast forward correctly through, like grabbing, you know, these iframes and ensuring the GOPs, right? You have to get the GOPs all correct. It's very
iframes in this case are very different from the iframes y'all are thinking of as web devs. It means the frame that is the pixel perfect frame with all of the info as like a traditional image, because video isn't actually going to give you an image for every single frame. If you had 30 4K images every second in video for a 30 FPS video, that would be impossible to work with. The files would be comically massive. So what most video compressors do is they have an iframe method where there's one frame that's perfect, and then every additional frame describes what's changed since that frame, which makes it much easier to compress and have a decent quality video that's way smaller. And most of these algorithms are smart enough to notice that, like, hey, the scene changed. Like, if I went from this view to this view, back to this view, the vast majority of the pixels changed, which means that an iframe should be created on the frame where those transitions happened, because enough of the data is different that diffing it is more expensive than just putting the new frame in. And that quick switch, if I do it like once or twice more, sorry for anybody who has issues with color flashing, that's probably going to cause the YouTube algorithm to choke hard. That's also why confetti in video does so poorly, or like rain, because you can't compress things that are changing like which pixel they're in on every frame, because that's really hard to compress. Too much change data. Anyways.
very difficult. All right, I think one of the main problems with Unity testing, okay, well, calm down, is that folks don't suggest to remove some code in the code reviews because more tests equals good. I do agree with this take.
Yep. I also agree. People just blindly treating having more tests as inherently better is one of the biggest issues that's caused the pushback on unit testing that exists today.
I like this take actually quite a bit. Eventually, you can get to a state where you have so many tests that they are difficult to maintain and break at every single character change you make. Yeah, absolutely. The problem is that when you get too low on your unit testing, you reach a point where when you change even small interfaces, things are just breaking all over the place. You got to be careful about exactly where you have your units and what things you think you're testing. I try to really, hold on, sorry. This is just absurd. Okay, that's it. We're putting them on the big board. You're getting on blast, buddy. I hope you got some good messages behind you. Okay, you're lucky. You're lucky you have good chat history. Okay? You're lucky you have good chat history. You almost just got kicked right out of the startup, buddy. Easy for you to say when you have Teach ghost coding for your unit test. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to get even more accusations of that with Julius and Mark, but yeah.
Absolutely. Test coverage is great for testing if your test executed. How dare you challenge a Netflix engineer? No, it's just stupid to say you can do anything in some small period of time. It's a very complicated feature. I hate manual testing. It slows down so much. Yes, I miss the things. And I miss things a lot. But if I'm testing the public interfaces with unit or integration test, then it usually catches things I forgot about. Had this happen recently? Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this is why that's why I love driving implementation via tests, because I just think it's easier. Like while I was developing Harpoon over the charity stream, I actually finally I got pissed off because I kept launching making Harpoon, launching a Vim instance, closing it down, reopening it, having the new Harpoon, requiring it in, trying to do the operation. I was like, okay, dude, this is just ridiculous.
I agree with what he's saying, but I don't agree with his initial framing, because what he just described isn't he starts with the test and then builds the code. He almost like made a TDD framing and then made a very much not TDD argument, where he was running into a specific iteration problem as he was building, where one particular part of his workflow, like one feature he was adding, had a manual testing flow that was too tedious to justify. So instead of continuing to do that manual testing flow, he automated it. But this is our job as engineers. It's to take things that aren't efficient for us or for the users we're building and solve it then and there. And I fully agree with that direction of like, hey, this thing was hard for me to iterate on. I'm going to write code so I can iterate on it faster. If that's how you're using unit testing, if it's one of many tools you use to allow you to deliver solutions to problems faster, I'm all on board.
Right? I need to be able to just take a test, create a file, create a buffer, take my file, sync it, expect it to be there, right? Like I can't, dude, crazy to be able to think about anything else, right? It's just crazy. I love driving implementation.
Good to see you in chat, Prime. Sorry, I clickbaited you into watching your own video with us live right now.
Via that. It's very, very good. Wait, are you not a public interface to ChatGPT, Google? $5 a month? What is this? Don't write bugs. No need for testing. Yeah, that's fair. What is Harpoon? The greatest thing ever since NetBeans? All right, let's keep on going. I like that little chat, though. That was a good chat. Before I end this, does anyone have a hardline stance hating unit tests? All right, why? Can someone give me a reason why you have a hardline?
How many of y'all who said that during their live are here right now?
Hate unit tests. And how much of your hating unit tests is because Theo says so?
I'm trying to sit here and agree with you, Prime. God damn it. Why do you think I'm the main character on Reddit right now, Prime? It's not even that you're wrong. It's that people want you to be wrong so badly that they will be loud about anything that could arguably be wrong. And I am sorry for anything that my unit testing coverage has caused in that way. I took a really strong stance against unit testing because the public stance and like the public understanding was very much pro unit testing when I showed up in the space. And I don't think unit tests should go away. I just think that this holier perspective of them was incredibly destructive. And the result was weird back-end requirements for unit testing that weren't even great in those spaces being enforced on full stack and front-end devs, slowing them down, pissing them off, and resulting in a ton of bad tests and even worse code powering it. Yeah, I think we have like the exact same stance. We're just working on opposite sides of the problem.
Okay, so I love this take right here. When I'm figuring out a product, I don't want to maintain them while I discover and play around. Perfectly fair. Absolutely same team. Absolutely same team. Absolutely. Yeah, okay, this is also fair. I struggle with that too, right? What is worth testing versus what is not worth testing? What if I have a different? I don't have a unit test. Okay.
I have no idea what he says on this point, but I'll drop my stance before his. I really like the idea of testing being driven by your experience as a developer. So if you have something that's hard to iterate on because of like what he described earlier with like the process of spinning it up, getting it running, checking the outputs, if you have something like that and it's slowing down your iteration and you have a way to write a test to speed up your iteration, all in, love it. I just saw Tywins in chat say, test what you detest. And I actually really like that phrase or that phrasing. It's so... Testing should be focused around what is fragile and what is painful, not around what is in your code base. And if your unit tests are meant to be like a guide to how all of your code works, they have lost so much of their value. If unit tests are symbolic of this thing is hard to work on or this problem has been solved, we want to make sure the solution stays and is maintained well. These are good reasons to unit test. If you have a problem that a unit test solves, use a unit test. But if you're running into this problem of like, I don't know how granular to go, I don't know how to test this thing, I don't know if this thing should be tested, take a step back. You don't need to have a unit test for every single thing.
I hate that they imply and somehow... Okay, first off, you got to take another spin at English. Spyro, I know you better than this. I know you can type properly. Whatever you just said there was confusing. You know the most about the problem you are trying to solve after you've solved it. Exactly. That's why I do like the write it once and throw it away.
Prime just said in our chat, if you write unit tests because you're supposed to write unit tests, you're likely wrong. Yep. And so much of my industry experience was writing unit tests because there was some code coverage metric or some person who has no idea what I'm working on, but really likes unit testing and thinks it's important and enforced. And like Amazon had an 80% code coverage rule for any production service, which by absolute bullshit reasons, included front-end applications, which was absurd. Code coverage is always a mistake, but code coverage on front-end applications is an absolute disaster. And a lot of my frustration is trying to counterbalance that. That said, I feel like we've succeeded. There's now enough people pushing back on unit tests that I don't have to take that super strong stance anymore. And I'm doing more things where unit tests are actually beneficial to my work. So my public stance has changed pretty significantly here, where I'm not just going to come out and say all unit tests are bad, but by doing that for long enough, I've shifted the narrative, and I'm actually really proud of the impact this community has had in these conversations.
I do like the write it once, throw it away approach. I unit test everything because I have a hard time to decide where to draw the line. See, I think that is also bad, right? I think you're going to end up reaching kind of like these shitty places where you have too many tests and they just don't make sense. And when you need to make a change because you didn't really know your product, you like ruin half your tests.
Yep, absolutely agree. Also, same argument I make about Rust.
You really have to. I think the thing is that I think why most people don't like unit tests is because they've been forced to write unit tests for everything. And
did you pre-watch me reacting to your video, Prime? God damn it.
Because you're forced to write unit tests, you end up writing a bunch of stupid-ass unit tests. For personal projects, do you suggest writing unit tests? Not right away, and it depends. Again,
the Prime travel joke. Sasha, are you kidding? God damn it. That's too good. That's the next channel, Prime. Time travel-agen. Pre-watch-agen. We love it.
Always. Dude, this is such a huge depends. If you're just doing like a CRUD app, you probably don't have to worry about it. Real talk, do you have to worry about it? If you're just building a little website to do something, you don't have to worry about it. Here's something that I'm about to do. My next project in Vim after I finish off Harpoon 2 is going to be APM. There is no way for you to listen to Vim motions and know what motion was just executed. That means I have to see the incoming stream of keys and determine what is the state of Vim. Are we in insert mode? Are we in visual mode? Are we in whatever blah, blah, blah mode? Therefore, when keys are executed, I have to like discover the motion you are creating. Do you realize how difficult that would be to create without unit tests? That is a very simple and obvious thing you're going to want to unit test.
I absolutely agree, and I'm thankful I haven't done anything that's this hard of a like data state problem in a while. Funny enough, the last time I felt this way was when I was exploring using XState for some of the stuff that we were doing at Ping. And I realized like as I diagrammed the complexity of our state machines so we can make this into a proper state machine, I found like 3 or 4 places where we could significantly simplify the state machines. And I ended up making like an 80 line of code Zustand thing that was way easier to manage. But the process I went through to adopt the right solution was such that I ended up making a better solution and didn't need that. Prime in chat saying, Theo and I just from two ends agreeing with each other, yelling across a gulf, which is hilarious because a lot of people think we strongly disagree, but we actually mostly agree. Yep, as per usual, Prime and I mostly agree on these things.
The engine to capture keys and to correctly identify, that is like a black box of all time. It is literally just like, here is a black box, here's a string of keys, what happened?
I just saw another really good chat message. I need to stop doing this to myself. There has to be a better way. There's a pretty good guide on when to test. Absolutely agree. Because one of two things will happen. Either you don't find a better way, so now you have a test to make sure the current way stays working and an easier way to work on it, iterate on it. Or when you're writing the test and you're thinking about how to break this problem up into a testable thing, you end up finding ways to simplify it. And that's a really, really big win.
Output better be this, input better be this. This is like perfect. Black box. This is unit testing to a T. What is good? Because to make that correct is really, really hard. B, to test it is really, really hard. Manually testing, that would be a nightmare.
Okay, potentially dumb question. Does Lua always look this much like JavaScript? And am I fucking up by not playing with it more? Because this is totally readable to me, and I actually kind of like it.
And C, since the input and the output will be known, it is super, super, super simple. You know what I mean?
Somebody just said yes, but Lua arrays start at 1. Cool. Never touching it again. That's all I needed to hear. Thank you.
So that's kind of how I look at it. Right? Winchester usually has some pretty good takes in here. Tad, testing after development. I'm a big fan of testing after development.
I will say, as a fellow ex-wrencher, that the Twitch mindset of testing everything is very toxic. And I'm not surprised that Jordan isn't sure if he should be writing unit tests, trying to call out these cultures that cause a certain type of brain rot for developers. We should be able to know when a test makes sense. And my philosophy on testing was, we test things when they break and we test things when they're hard. And if you don't have one of those two problems in your personal project, don't test it. If you've had one or two of those problems in your personal project, you should test it.
Jordan, I think I answered yours. Like, to me, it's just like, find a problem that you can make that makes sense to test. Like, that is, to me, that's obvious. It's obvious that you'd want to unit test it. I have a different take. I hate what unit tests imply, and they are easy to manage poorly. Yes, agreed.
I would make the argument that unit tests are a pretty dangerous primitive because they don't offer almost any guidance on how big or small they should be, where they should or shouldn't be put in, all of that. Unit tests are the use effect of culture, almost, where use effect, if you actually need it and have a good reason for using it, can be absolutely phenomenal. But you're just as likely to cause a problem as you are to solve one by like the greater state of things. But if you actually know what you're doing, that use effect's going to make things better and often even simpler if you get it right. Same with testing. I would argue the majority of unit tests are as bad as the majority of use effect calls. And depending on the quality of the engineers and their experience, you're going to see a difference in how good the average test is in that code base and how good the average use effect invocation is in that code base.
Usually give most focus on integration tests, and if there's a function that is a bit expensive / complex, I do develop a unit test. I don't write tests while I just test it. Hold on. I don't write tests while I just testing and trying to understand how to build something. Sometimes I need to build something to know if it's the correct way. Yes, I will, even if I'm stuck on something that's hard, I will write a unit test. For me, unit test is driving that really annoying part of development where you have to try to like launch programs and like different things at once to know that you're doing it correct. So for me, it's like, if I can cut that time from 20 seconds plus context shifting to 20 milliseconds, absolute win every single time. Even if it takes me an hour, that amount of like not having to do that cycle saves so much time.
Almost entirely agree. I would probably personally take up to twice as much time writing tests as it could theoretically solve me. Like what he just described, going from 200 milliseconds to 20 milliseconds. If that's only going to save you half an hour of time, I'm still down to put an hour into writing the test because all of that context shifting and the possibility of needing it in the future is probably going to be worth it. As contradictory as that might sound to a lot of my stance, knocking down those small windows to smaller from 20 seconds to 20 milliseconds, that ends up being worth it, even if you're spending an hour fixing it, because of how much better your workflow can be from it. And I'm very down to make those types of investments. If you want to see the rest of Prime's video, I'm going to cut it here so you can go watch it on his channel. We're not into stealing content here, just reacting to the things we feel like are relevant. I want to drop a huge shout out to Prime and everybody else who hung out here for this, and all of you for being down for my chaotic pushback on all of these types of things. I know my testing takes have been a little controversial, but I hope this helps you understand that I'm not here just to shit on unit tests. I want us to be more responsible as we solve these problems, both for us as the developers who make these decisions, but also for the developers who learn from us and look up to us and are doing whatever they can to be successful at their jobs. Unit tests are easy to get wrong, but they're really powerful if you get them right. And I think this video is a great example of Primeagen publicly showing what good unit tests look like. So yeah, turns out Prime and I kind of agree on this. If you want to see me starting to embrace unit tests more effectively at my job, I'll pin a video in the corner there about that. If you've already seen it, you're not interested, YouTube thinks you like the one underneath. Thank you guys as always. Appreciate y'all a ton. Peace, nerds.